Mass Effect 5 has the potential to push the boundaries within the sci-fi genre, specifically with its existential questions around what it means to actually be alive. The organic versus synthetic debate has been at the core of Mass Effect since its inception. And moving forward, the next game needs to push this even further. And I think we've already been shown clues hinting at this happening. I've recently finished my first playthrough of Cyberpunk 2077, and it really got me thinking about the potential that Mass Effect 5 has when it comes to the questions that these sci-fi games can ask us. And first off, I just want to say, no, I don't want the two series to be the same. They are two very different, very distinct games and universes, and they should obviously remain that way. But I think Cyberpunk does a very good job at asking questions about what it means to be alive and what consciousness really is. And Mass Effect 5 should take some inspiration from these themes. And yes, Mass Effect does ask similar questions, but these haven't really been expanded upon in the way that the series has the potential to do. And with two major reveals from last year's N7 Day, I think that this could be a major theme that helps move the franchise forward. In this N7 poster, we zoom in and see that in this scene, there is an Angara and Geth in the middle. And the Geth and the Angara are two sides of the same coin, and present the perfect opportunity to ask, what is life? What is a soul? Where does a soul come from? What determines if something is alive? What is the difference between a created organic being versus a created synthetic being? And Mass Effect should expand upon the organic versus synthetic debate that was so well established in previous games. But the series needs to move past the main conflict being between them again. It's time for this to evolve, and Mass Effect 5 should focus more on the aspect of what is sentience, what is being alive in a world where synthetic and organic beings are created, and where the technology exists to clone yourself and rebuild your body almost from scratch. These are the themes that I want explored. Because would you consider the Angara synthetic? We don't know much about how they were actually created, but they were in fact created, just like the Geth. While the Geth were made out of synthetic materials, the Angara were made out of organic materials, but both were created without souls. The Angara we meet in Andromeda on Key to Sierra are empty templates. They are empty bodies without a consciousness or soul or spirit or being inhabiting them. So is that not similar to how the Geth were created? How did Jaal get a soul? And if you think Jaal doesn't have a soul because he came from a lineage of created beings, then I assume you'd think Legion didn't have a soul. But the game's narrative pushes you to ask these questions, and the Geth and the Angara were made the same. And yet no one questions if Jaal or the Angara have souls or are actually alive. Despite the Angara we find being devoid of any actual life but a physical shell. I think there is an extremely interesting conversation there, specifically around the Geth and Angara, and I would love to see them explored, especially if the Geth and Angara are asking each other these questions. The Geth have moved beyond being the antagonist, and to further move the organic versus synthetic themes forward, their personhood and individuality needs to be focused on. And that's what I hope we see in Mass Effect 5. I want the comparisons made between the Angara and the Geth. I want the narrative and themes to ask us what we consider alive, and what we consider to have a soul, and what a soul even is. I want these existential questions to be explored in a way that only sci-fi can do. I also want to see the same themes around the possibility of more AI characters like EDI. The conversations around EDI and Legion having souls are still going on today, 12 years later, and the fanbase is still undecided. Would you say EDI has a soul? Would you say that her affection for the Normandy crew and Joker is genuine? Or her program trying to ensure her survival? If EDI survived, I'd love to see her again. But if not, I want a new AI companion that we can go more in depth with the possibilities around that story. And Mass Effect 5 has already been set up to explore these themes even more. If you're unfamiliar with the virtual alien storyline set up in Mass Effect 3, in short summary, there is a race of virtual aliens that made contact with the Council in 2185. They downloaded their minds into a virtual world years and years ago to avoid the destruction of their civilization, which we know nothing about. When their ship was running out of power, they contacted the Council for help, and they did eventually help. And in return for their help, the virtual aliens gave secret technology to the Council. The virtual aliens restored their ship and continued their journey through the Milky Way galaxy. But the most interesting part of the story is that several of the virtual aliens traded their consciousness with individuals who were already living on the Citadel. So they traded their minds and bodies, and currently on the Citadel, there are several beings who had once lived in the virtual world. We don't know how old they are, we don't know where they came from, or if they once had bodies or what they looked like. And we don't know how they transferred someone's consciousness with their own. This in itself is extremely interesting. Did they transfer souls? Did they download someone's mind? How is this even possible? And this is another instance of a consciousness moving between bodies, because you'd have to assume that the Angara had minds and souls to transfer into those empty templates. Or could they create them? So not only do I want to know about the virtual aliens, I want to both meet them and the individuals that they swapped consciousness with. It's fascinating to think about those possibilities. Another extremely interesting aspect that Mass Effect has already touched on is the concept of AIs. One of the more interesting stories around AIs, aside from the Geth and EDI, is the ancient AI found on Vold in Andromeda. You have this isolated AI who would rather die than be held against its will. This AI is extremely hostile and violent towards the Angara and Ryder. And on the opposite side of this, seems to flirt with Sam. It has both seemed to have gone crazy from isolation, but also has a desire to survive, which is a very humanizing trait. We also have no idea where it's from or who created it. There's a lot of mystery around this AI. And of course, Sam has its own personality, sometimes hiding things from Ryder and saying questionable responses that an AI shouldn't have opinions on. Sam has started to become a person to an extent, and I think if we'd ever have gotten an actual sequel, Sam being put into an Angara template or something along those lines seems like a plausible continuation of where I felt the story was going. Andromeda felt like it was going to further expand on AI and synthetic creations with the Jardan, the Angara, and Sam, but it just never got the chance to. And we know that the Jardan created the Angara. And it seems like the remnants can only be used by an organic/synthetic combined interaction, specifically like Ryder had. So were the Jardan part AI? Did they find a way to merge with synthetics? Or were they fully synthetics themselves? Again, a million possibilities here. And with the Angara in the poster, I feel like exploration of the Jardan is inevitable. The Jardan creating the Angara is probably the most interesting aspect of the Angara's history. I desperately want to know everything about the Jardan and the creation of the Angara. Why were they created? How were they created? When did the Jardan create them? And are there more Angara outside of the Helios cluster? These are questions I hope to see explored in Mass Effect 5 and the future of the entire franchise. Despite everything we've seen, I still don't expect a direct Andromeda sequel, but there are aspects that can be continued without even being in Andromeda, especially if they choose to put the Angara and Jardan in the Milky Way galaxy, which is entirely possible. Andromeda already set this up with this one specific conversation that we have.
Do you know much about where your ancestors traveled?
No, not at all. The Scourge wiped out nearly everything. We're only just beginning to travel again.
Could they have made it to another galaxy, like us?
It's possible. For all we know, there are entire Angaran worlds beyond our reach.
But aside from the mysteries left from Andromeda, there's still so many stories and themes of the original trilogy that need to be expanded upon. And we still need to find out what happened to Shepard. And while I'm not a fan of the clone/downloading Shepard's mind into the Geth consensus as a way to bring back Shepard theory, this is something that could happen in Mass Effect. What I mean is that the world has already set up this possibility. During Legion's quest, when Shepard goes into the Geth consensus, they have access to Shepard's mind, and I suppose they could probably have copied it. Though the state of the Geth consensus after Legion's assimilation is unknown, the concept is still there. And this was also done in Mass Effect Andromeda Annihilation, where a Quarian named Liat Nir had her personality imprinted before she died, becoming an Ancestor VI. Yes, this is different than an actual AI like the Geth, but the ability to copy personalities and traits could be expanded upon and could lead to more. The Quarians also had a massive Ancestor databank that was unfortunately destroyed in the beginning of the Morning War. But again, they were copying personalities and turning them into VIs. And President Huerta of Huerta Memorial Hospital had a stroke that left him legally dead for 90 minutes before his brain functions were transferred to a computer. There was an entire legal case, Ford versus Huerta, around this event, which resulted in protest and unrest within the country, because after this stroke killed him and his brain functions were transferred to a computer, he still served for another year in office. And this brings me back to Cyberpunk 2077. In Cyberpunk, a personality can be copied on a digital neural engram. And there's a debate on whether this is the person's true personality, since it lacks what you would consider a soul. If President Huerta's brain functions were transferred to a computer, what part of him is actually living on? These are fascinating things to think about, and Mass Effect asks these questions over and over, and it's time to expand on these themes. Additionally, in Mass Effect 1, we see the Thorian take over Shiala, but she then gets her mind back. And we also see the Reapers take control of people's minds and actions. There's a ton of exploration here, with the transfer of consciousness, and the virtual aliens swapping their own consciousness adds to the mystery. And I think a lot of what's been in Mass Effect already is really just the surface of the potential that these can explore. Playing Cyberpunk has really reminded me at just how much the sci-fi genre can push boundaries, especially on these existential questions on what it means to be alive. In Cyberpunk, we also have people who have been taken over by AIs, and people who have been assimilated into AIs themselves. We have people who have transferred consciousness and bodies, and the ability to view another person's memories. There are even people who have replaced their entire bodies with technology. The game explores some really interesting concepts that focus really heavily on human advancement with AI, and the dangers and risk associated with that. And that isn't something we've seen really heavily explored in Mass Effect, and I think it should be. The Geth, the Angara, the Jardan, the AI, it already exists. The foundation is there. And I hope Mass Effect can ask us some deeper questions around these themes. I'd also like to see more technological advances if this game has any type of time jump. I still think about that Game Informer reporter saying that Mass Effect 5 has been confirmed to be about 600 years in the future. And if that is true, that would be a major jump for humanity. And I'd expect some progression, technology-wise. We know that in the current world of Mass Effect, there have been some technological advancements, but a lot of them rely on Prothean technology. And a lot of those advancements revolve around spaceflight and biotics. And we haven't seen smaller-scale technological advancements, specifically with the human race evolving on their own. Not only would I like to see new biotic abilities, but I'd like to see more advancement, especially for the human race when it comes to technology, especially outside of travel and combat. Is there room for direct technological advancements with humans? In the form of medical treatments or combat advantages, or really just by choice? Obviously, I don't mean copying Cyberpunk in the way that it lets you replace your whole body with tech, but I love Joker as a character, and it was really awesome to see a disabled character navigate his way in the world. And I think a new character who maybe has a cybernetic arm or leg, or use technology as a medical device, seems completely plausible in the Mass Effect world, and would be interesting to explore. I could also see rich characters using technology to extend their life, in the way that Miranda's was extended, and Shepard's if they did end up surviving. There's so many opportunities here, and I hope that Mass Effect 5 can expand upon these really interesting themes that have already been explored on a surface level. And in previous games, we haven't had a lot of time to actually explore Earth. We haven't really seen how much humans have advanced, because we haven't seen Earth as much as we've seen places like the Citadel or Omega, and I'd love to see an explorable city similar to Night City, but on a much smaller scale, where we can both see how Earth has changed and how it has advanced, especially if there is a time jump. Mass Effect is such a relatable story that we connect with so easily because it's a story about humanity exploring space and meeting aliens and the future. And yet we've seen so little of how the human race is actually doing on Earth. And no, I don't want an open world like Andromeda was, but some exploration would be nice. Something in the middle between the original trilogy and Andromeda, with city hubs, explorable buildings, interesting side quests, etc. So, what do you think about all of this? What possibilities do you think seeing a Geth and Angara being together opens? How do you want to see the organic versus synthetic debate continue in Mass Effect? Have you played Cyberpunk, and do you want any themes or concepts to be inspired from Cyberpunk in Mass Effect 5? And I'm working on a much larger Angara Jardan Geth AI video, which will expand a lot more on these topics that I touched on, while also going deeper into my theories for Mass Effect 5. So make sure to subscribe for more Mass Effect news, theories, and lore videos. I'm also working on some Cyberpunk videos, and of course we'll be covering any upcoming Exodus news, which I'm expecting within the next 2 weeks. So let me know all your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching.